Welcome to Great Lean Leaders, Making the Business Case. I'm Dr. Shannon Flummerfelt, and we're so pleased to have back with us today Tony DeCaria, who is the Continuous Improvement Strategy Group Manager at DTE. And Tony, thank you for being here today.
You are welcome. You're welcome. My pleasure.
Well, great. The last round that you did with us, you shared a lot of very rich strategy development and rich work that has been done at DTE around the lean journey and also the development of lean leadership within the organization. So I want to continue talking today about some of the lean leadership practices and some other issues, and of course, get to the point of making the business case
Okay.
and why people should mess around with this stuff to begin with. But let's start with data-driven decision making.
Okay.
I know you guys are heavy into it, and you've talked a lot about it in round
Oh, yeah.
one.
Yeah.
But yeah, can you tell us about data-driven decision making, how important it is, what your process looks like? And then also, the point of data-driven decision making is to gain, as many perspectives that are in the value stream as possible. And what do you do with disparate perspectives when people don't agree with the analysis or the interpretation of the data? So what does that all look like, that whole package there of, do you use it? If so, what is your process? And then how do you use data-driven decision-making to deal with conflict or different points of view?
Right. Right. All right. So yeah, a lot of questions in there.
Yeah, I'll break it down for you.
Let me kind of just take it from the top and kind of how I think about the data. Right. So, I mean, there's so much data. I mean, especially at like a big company like DTE, we've got so much information that's coming in every day. And we have it because we all feel like it's very important. Like DTE really, thrives on making informed decisions, right? And we are we're a publicly traded company. We're a highly regulated utility. We are so important to the community. What do you do if we don't have power? We don't even have this conversation, right? So it's super important, and having that data is important, but it's not everything. It's not everything in my mind. The key to me is that you got to know your data, what it can do and what it can't do for you. And so for me, I would say that data first, I kind of think about your process question. Your data first helps me prioritize, right? Helps me focus, where do I want these resources to go? What's the most important thing I need to go work on, and kind of zero in on those critical things that I need to focus on. And it's hard to do that because there is so much data. You got to make sense of it all, right? And so that's a big thing, is to understand what data you're actually getting and what's important to get. And so that's my first thing is knowing where to go. It kind of points you in the right direction. But this is where I kind of say it's important, but it's not everything, because I love data. I'm a huge data guy, but I love the point of activity more. We talk about Gemba, right? That we call that the point of activity at DTE. And actually, you remind me of we had a ex Toyota coworker that we had at DTE, and he used to always say, is it data or is it fact? And that has always stuck with me. It's like,
Yeah,
because a lot of times you've got bad data, you got unbalanced data, data that points you in a direction, and if you keep going, you're going to get blinded by like what's really happening out there. So I like data, but I need facts. So that's my it's kind of my feeling about data. Data is important, but facts are the king, right? And so getting out to that point of activity is the kind of the next step in my process, I'll say. And I've got one tomorrow actually that I'm doing. So I'm going out to Grand Rapids to work on getting the facts from our crew. So we've got some crews that what they do day in and day out, generally speaking, is they repair leaking gas. They repair the pipes under the ground, right? And so I've got data that I've got a little team, and we just ran some ANOVA analysis, analysis of variance, using some of our statistical tools that told us, hey, look, the leak repair process we've got in Grand Rapids, that's significantly different than the one we have at our, Lynch Road facility in Detroit. But is it? I don't really know until I go see, like, are there other factors? Maybe the data isn't good enough. Maybe they're putting in the data in a weird way, or it's just not capturing something about the work that makes it look different, but really it's kind of a standard, similar process that we're doing. So I got to go see, I got to go see and turn that data into fact. If we don't do that as a team, we could be marching down a path that we really, are wasting our time, right? And so I think that's to me, that's the big thing with data. It's super important because it can really help you, but the facts are the most important thing of all. So
Yeah, I think that's really important, kind of progressing from data-driven decision-making to fact-based decision-making.
right.
And then the idea that, the source of truth, I mean, lies at Gemba,
Yeah,
that's really where you can see what's actually going on, and measuring the facts and the data. And of course we would like to see in any organization a progression to taking the data from a fact to knowledge to organizational
right,
intelligence, where now you could understand what really are we doing at all of our sites with this and so on. So it's an
right.
interesting progression. So then the kind of the last piece of that is, what do you do when you go to Grand Rapids and you have, other operations going on throughout the state of Michigan, and everyone's doing it a little bit differently, and
Yeah.
people, have a disagreement then about what you're seeing from the data, the facts, and of course, Gemba and the source of truth. So how do you handle that?
Well, I would say this is I won't say it's a point of contention, but people have a lot of different opinions on exactly what this is. Some people want to standardize across the board, and there's a lot, even in our, I think this kind of CI, this lean community, standardization is this foundation, for Kaizen is foundation for improvement, right? Um, but standards, I'm a believer that standards are meant to be played with, are meant to be, I guess I like to look at it in terms of, um, play versus games. We talked last time about this, kind of my ideas on creativity, right? And
Yeah.
I really feel like games are how you play within, or kind of games are, you have this giant rule set. It's all
Yeah.
rule based things.
Right.
Play, make up your own rules, and a lot of times, like my kids, I got an 8-year-old and 11-year-old right now. And when they're playing and they're just kind of doing imaginative things, half the play of that is arguing about what should be the rules. Right? That's what they're trying to get to. But they make these cool, creative, new things. And that's, to me, I think about it in terms of like business, in terms of my work. And when we create the new things, could be the better ways. This is the improvement work, is to play around with it to
Mm-hmm.
then get that rule set up. What is that rule that we really want to have? And so I'm a believer of, you know, standards are fine. It'd be nice to share. Here's the new thing that somebody found out and played with. Let's share that with you. And we call that at DTE, we have a capability for that called our C3, or our share new knowledge capability. So if for some reason Grand Rapids, which looks like it's, got higher productivity, a significantly better productivity, well, what are they doing differently? What did they figure out over there that maybe wasn't shared yet? Let's share that. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason it's not able to be done. Maybe, or maybe we don't say let's standardize, but we say, hey, this is an idea. Why don't you guys try to play with that idea? See what you can come up with, and who knows what they'll do. Um, so I'm not a big fan of forcing the issue on someone. I want to explain it. I want to say, let me communicate what this this difference might be, and encourage them to play with it, encourage them to take those steps to self-improve, right? So that's my take on it. But again, I know I don't that opinion is not shared with everyone in this community. So
No, I think that's great, because standardization is not an end in itself. It should always
right,
answer the value proposition, right? And so, the development of standards to create value-added standardization, as you have the great metaphor of moving from play, where you're improving, innovating, and even transforming into, okay, how do we actually operationalize this thing? And that,
Right.
that's the game. And so I think it's great, to be thinking about it in that way, because, if not, and of course we see many of our great companies today in America floundering because that door is closed.
Yeah.
And and then standardization ironically falls apart when there's not that play side and that, innovation transformation piece happening. So it's a really interesting dynamic, and it's a tricky thing. It's something
Yeah.
that is very highly nuanced that, lean leaders have to be able to navigate. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that.
You bet. You bet.
So let's move on then to communication. What do you consider the keys to successful communication? And also, I know you've demonstrated and shared, some examples of lean tools that help you to communicate, but
Yeah.
how critical are lean tools and strategies for the communication work that you need to do?
Um, I would say that we talked a little bit about this last time. As soon as you talk about communication, the first thing that pops in my head are those 5 frequencies. I think we talked about the 5 frequencies
Yeah.
last time, um, and that's a big key for me. I tend to think about how I'm communicating with people along those 5 lines. So that's really important for me. But another one that has come to mind, and I use it very often, is something called the SCARF model, which I don't think I talked about last time.
No, I
Um,
don't think you did. We didn't hear
yeah,
about.
so the SCARF model is something that I picked up from this guy again. I think I might have talked about him last time too, Dr. David Rock.
Yeah.
So yeah, David Rock. He wrote this book, a bunch of really good books. Your Brain at Work, Quiet Leadership. He's again. I got a little man crush on Dr. Rock here, but he created this thing called the SCARF model, which really describes how people experience a threat versus a reward. What brings people into this toward state, this growth, this kind of growth mindset versus kind of pulling back in this away, state, right? And so I use that really in I'll say my more formal communications. So when I think about communication, right now I'm thinking for the 5 frequencies defines all the different kinds, but when I'm thinking about how I'm, formally communicating with people, I really want people to feel like, come with me, right? I need you to. That's a lot of what we do in the lean world, right? Is we're trying to get people to come along and to grow and to try new things, right? And to do that. So to do that, we've got to make sure people don't feel threatened. Don't feel threatened. So I love the SCARF model. I have I could talk for a long time about the SCARF model, so I'm not going to do that right now. But
Well, give us the high points of it. Like what is it
so
about?
here's kind of what it means. So again, it's SCARF is an acronym, right? So it stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. Okay, and so each of those is kind of it's kind of a factor that determines whether you're feeling toward something, like something, or kind of pulling away from something. And the way that Dr. Rock kind of explained this is it's like a river that's always flowing toward a threat, because we generally are, like, as humans, we're like self-protective. Any kind of new thing that comes in, you feel like could be threatened by it. And I'll give you an example of that. My daughter, when she was her first birthday, you'd have the first birthday cake and all that stuff, So we have this cake for her, and we're like trying to feed it to her. She's just like, oh God, like she's afraid of the cake, but it's cake, And so eventually you just got to shove it in her mouth, and all of a sudden she tastes the cake and is like, oh my gosh. And she starts to like grab the cake and stuff it all over her face and everything like that. It's a hilarious moment, but it just shows you that's what we do as humans, right? We're always like backing up on those new things. And that's what we do as leaders. We bring these new things forward. And so what the SCARF model tells us, okay, so if there's something along that is making you afraid, that's making you pull back. So in that instance, it might be certainty. I don't know what that is. I'm going to back up from that. But if you look at what you're trying to tell people, like maybe it's another certainty one that everyone's probably heard is, can I see you in my office?
Yeah.
Right? That's a huge threat for people, right?
What does that mean,
what did I
right?
do? Yeah, like, oh, your brain kind of lights on fire.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the other parts of the SCARF model, you can use those to your advantage as you're trying to communicate with people. So you can say, hey, you've been doing a fantastic job lately. I want to talk to you in my office about a new raise, or like some, oh, well, that's what you want to talk about. Do you have some time to come and talk to me? That's giving them autonomy and a choice in whether they can come or not, right? So each of those things has a thing. So status, and I don't want to get too detailed here because again, I could talk about this all day, but like status is, are you feeling like your status is raising or high with someone? Because if you feel like you're in a good place, you're more towards that person, right? If you know what's coming, you're going to be more understanding what's, so status, certainty, autonomy, again, having a choice in the matter. If you have a choice, you're going to probably be more willing to go if it's your choice to go. Relatedness is just kind of like friend or foe. So, which is really important also in the lean world, because if you don't know the people you're going to work with, how do you make those real quick connections? When I go talk to people, I usually end up talking about, like, on the front lines, I usually end up talking about sports. I end up talking about music, things like that. And so those, just how do you make those connections with people to open them up? Like, okay, this person's not a foe. This person's just like me. They like the Tigers too. Like, that's great. And then that last one is like fairness. Are you treating people the way you say? It's not less. I guess it's more like, am I doing what I say I'm going to do? Am I treating you the way that is fair between us? Not so much like I treat you and you all the same. It's a little bit different than that. But yeah, that's the SCARF model. Again, I could talk about that all day. But that's something I definitely am. I think about it a lot, especially when I'm doing more formal communications. How do I get people to come along? So
Yeah, I mean, it's push versus pull, right? That's really what you're describing there. And it's not just in production work or, office paperwork or, the order of how you fix a gas leak. It's actually in what people actually think and what they're feeling, and having having respect for that and creating that kind of pull. So that's very interesting. Very good. So best communication moment you can think of would be?
So you kind of asked me this one earlier too, like, what's the best comms moment? And I kind of feel like communicating is like trying to land a plane. Anytime I can land a message, it's a success for me. So like, so it doesn't, like, I don't really have like a best moment, but I definitely have some worst moments, and maybe that'll suffice here too. So I'm willing to share this.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Let's talk about that then, if you don't mind.
Right, because you can always turn it into like, what's the learning here? So
Right.
one that really sticks out in my mind is when I was with Comerica Bank. Okay, so this is probably 10, 15 years ago. So I was coming out of about 6, 7, 8 years in a plant environment before I had gotten to this more corporate office environment with the bank, right? So I was at Tyson Foods, I was in slaughterhouses. We're in plant environments where, a plant, you're kind of like all a family, you're all trying to get the things done. A little bit different in the corporate world, but it didn't feel like it to me because it was still one building, we're all in this together, right? So, as an IE or as a plant manager, and that's what I'm coming in as, like an industrial engineer, and walking around these plants. In my understanding, it's fine. You walk up to the line, you walk up and talk to people. You're welcome. Everyone knows you're here to help. How can we help? What can I do? That's the attitude I expected in Comerica, right? That's the attitude I expected. Well, unfortunately, at Comerica, on my very first project at Comerica, so I walked back into one of the back office processing groups, right? And I just start talking to people on the team, and it was going great. I'm asking questions, getting info, everything was good. And the manager just comes storming over, and she said, "Who are you?" She's demanding, like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" So I'm like, "Hey, I'm Tony. This is what I'm doing. I'm new. I just started like a couple weeks ago. This is what I'm trying to help with. Your boss asked us to help with this. Well, you can't come talk to my people without asking me first. You need to set a meeting up with me before you come onto my floor." I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Like, I talked to her a little bit more, say, "Would it be okay for me if I can continue this conversation with your people?" And I expected, I'd be welcome. I could go continue. She's like, "Nope." She kicked me out of her area. And I'm like, "Oh, man." And so I'll never forget that moment, right? That was like my introduction to like what a bureaucracy can really look like, and that in each work environment you're at, even in the same company, like there are different little
Yeah.
communication protocols that people expect, and you don't know what those rules are, but you need to figure that out to be successful, right? So that was a bad experience that I had, but it was a really strong learning from that experience. Is you got to understand those kind of hidden, hidden rules and those things that are happening inside of this work world that you're in. So
Yeah. So, I mean, Warren Bennis says culture is the way we do things around here. And so,
that's right.
the differences in culture have a very significant impact on the way that you communicate, how you choose to do that, and so on. And then, it's interesting to think about the people who were in the meeting. They were probably wondering, what is this guy Tony, this new guy Tony, even doing? Because and they probably didn't tell you that, but were maybe thinking that. I don't know, but it's interesting that you'd share that with us. So thank you for that. I think
Yeah.
it's important that we are very much aware of our context and the climate and the
Yeah.
culture that we work in as lean leaders. So obviously, the lean journey is about always working through continuous improvement. And, your title is a continuous improvement strategy group manager. And so zero defect thinking is really the pursuit, right? That's what we're trying to get to, is that
And never pass a
superior,
defect. Yep. Yep.
yeah, and superior critical thinking and so on. So how do you ensure that that's always in play, that zero defect thinking and those, really high levels of critical thinking are happening? And, even, you can bring in any thoughts you have around technology. We talked about the amount
Yeah.
of data and understanding what data you really need. And, does AI or any other technological tool help with that zero defect thinking, that critical thinking, or not? I mean, what
Mm.
is our role with that? But just talk first of all about zero defect thinking and what it means to you in the work that you do there at DTE.
Okay. Yeah. So again, I'm a big believer also, don't pass a defect. It's zero defects. I like that as a goal to strive for. But I also, again, back to play versus games, right? I like to play with things, and sometimes when you play, you're going to make defects, and that's okay too, So that kind of, you're free to fail is that's a big thing for me too. But how I would say this works, especially at DTE, and we have this, again, we talk about these four capabilities. I've talked about this a lot, right? So we have a C1 capability. We call it process design. And that is huge for us, right? It's the capability of you design your work and you know exactly what's expected in that work in the most highly specified way possible. So anytime that something doesn't happen, and you, again, because if you know exactly what to expect, things should pop up pretty easy for you because you know this is exactly what should happen, right? And it allows you to see the problem, right? And it allows you to say, oh, that is a potential defect, or that is a defect. Let's just stop right now and make sure we figure that out. It's that whole concept of, stopping the line, pulling the end on cord. I would say most defects pass because we just don't see them. We just think they're ordinary. We think that's part of, it's just how it always is, right? And that's really hard. You mentioned the word ensure. Like, how do you ensure that, we're not passing a defect? New people coming in and out all the time. Like, the best way I think to ensure that people can do that is to be a great leader that's constantly helping set the expectation. I mentioned that leader model that we've got,
Mhm.
and that's that second one. That's the L, then the E is expectations. How do you communicate those expectations really well, and do it in as much detail as possible? I think that's a big thing for me, to do that. So I don't know if that answered that question.
No, I think that's good because,
Okay.
you spoke about, it's okay to fail, and there's definitely a need to create comfort, right, in getting to zero defect thinking, because
Yeah.
like you say, you're going to play, you're going to be wrong. And then also the idea that the status quo is such a powerful current state,
Oh yeah.
and the acceptance of that, the tolerance for that, kind of the standards that we live by come out of the status quo. And so zero defect thinking has to uproot all of that. And that's really, really difficult to do.
Yeah.
So how safe do you think it actually is in your organization to engage in zero defect thinking?
Um, I would say, I would say it's leader dependent. I'm going to just
Yes.
have the nice political answer there. It's leader dependent.
Yeah.
My experience in all the companies, not just DTE, is that it's pretty clear that people are going to refuse to speak up about how do you make this process a little bit better? How do you make sure that, we can fix defects when they come up? Uh, People aren't going to do that if the leadership isn't there to actively help and assist. I guess
Mhm.
that's what I'll say. When there's problems, but no one's helping you, why bother bringing it up? We just have to deal with it. And so I think that's a leader dependent thing, because I know there's a lot of leaders that do help, and when they do help and they do kind of give back and they're there for those people will constantly share ideas and say,
Mhm.
hey, this is how we can do this different, do this better. And um, and that's when, hey, I had this problem and I have this idea, but that's you need. And so I'm a huge believer that leaders drive this stuff.
Mhm.
Leaders are the key. So having a great leader that understands they need to be a part of this, you know discussion, they need to be a part of this improvement. And it's not just, hey, even though as much as we want to say this as, as progressive, thinkers, hey, I want our people to do the problem solving. I want my people to do. That's fine that if you want your people to do that, but you got to help still. Like you got to be a part of that in some
Mhm.
way. So I think leaders can create that environment by, of safety, by helping the team, serving them as they do their work. And I guess kind of gets me back into that thinking of coaching, right? Like uh, being a great coach. That's, to me, that's part and parcel of being a great leader. So how are you as a leader making people feel like they can come to you, and then you can make sure you as a leader can turn that thinking about the problems, thinking about, how are you going to go ahead and make this better for yourself? How are you going to solve that problem that you just came up with? Like, you have that defect, what can you do about that? Because then
Mhm.
that grows better thinkers, it grows better leaders, the whole 9 yards. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I think safety it's definitely leader dependent. um and again, there's a bell curve there. So
Yeah, for sure. And then, of course, we've mostly been talking about, the internal work on zero defect thinking. But of course, there's all kinds of coaching and leadership work
yeah,
that could be done within the enterprise.
yeah.
And, that would include your suppliers, all of your customers, all your
Hmm.
other, like your regulators and so on that impact the work that you do.
Yeah,
And
and that's a
so,
big deal right now for DTE.
yeah.
Actually, is the supplier quality.
Mhm.
um yeah, it's something we're starting to really focus on right now. So
Yeah, so is there anything you can share with us about, getting to zero defect in regard to that on the processes or the work that you do as a lean leader?
well, I'm not going to right now. That, I guess, that where the discussion is right now, where my head is thinking about that is, there's some discussion about incentivizing idea generation, but which I am not necessarily a fan of.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
again, it's not proven either way to work or not. But I have my own feelings about that. But
Okay.
yeah, but it's something that, as we are having trouble with things like, getting transformers in a timely, manner. Micro cracks on our solar panels. Like, there's all sorts of things that, that we could use a lot of help with, and from our suppliers. So getting that zero
Yeah.
defects coming to us would be great. Um, but that's even harder to extend beyond your walls into these
Yes.
spaces. So
Yeah.
I do love again, maybe speaking uh, from very slight experience here, but I do like the model that the Toyota Supplier Support Center has. So Jamie Benini and that team that he's had for a while, um, they go out and they help suppliers. That's kind of their charter, but they also go and spend half their time or more helping out like nonprofits and things. I just love that whole model.
Oh, wow.
So for those interested in looking at how to help with suppliers, it's a really cool thing that they built over there. So we had them actually come out and work with us for a little bit at DTE, doing some work in our substations that I was a part of. So it was really neat. It was really neat to learn more about that group. So.
That's very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. And then also the question about technology. How is that, or is it not impacting your work as a lean leader? What kinds of work would Industry 4.0, all the technological innovations and so on. Of course, AI is the big thing now. And I really don't think we understand what we mean when we say AI right now, but
Yeah, generative AI. Let's just
yeah, yeah,
break it down a little extra area.
right, yeah, generative for sure, because you want it to be progressing forward. Um, uh, so like, what are your thoughts on that in terms of how is that impacting you now as a leader? What are you seeing in the future around the technological advancements?
Yeah, I think technology. There's so many ways it's impacting us right now. I mean, even just throwing well, I won't call it a burning platform, but it's throwing an opportunity out there for everybody to rethink and
Mm.
start to again play with the work. And I'm a big fan of play with your work.
Yeah.
I like that it's offered us that. That's something actually that we just helped design for the company. We helped design some experiences for people where they could start to reimagine your work a little bit. So that again, that's one way that technology is kind of impacting us um, in that, I guess, in the lean leadership way. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it impacts us in a zillion ways, right? Just new technology, changing productivity, changing processes. I mean, there's all sorts of ways tech is doing that. But I'm thinking about like as a leader, as a leader, I think tech, when it's so tech done right can definitely help the work of a leader. Uh, I would say anything can be enhanced with tech. I'm a tech, you know, uh, proponent, I guess. Um, you start talking about AI a little bit. I've had thoughts already of creating like an AI leader, an AI coach. I think a lot of people would love the AI leader compared to what they have today in a lot of cases. But as far as how tech like impacts lean leadership, my instinct again is to talk about that leader model. And so I think tech would make it much faster and easier to learn about lean
Mhm.
and learn about things going on in your organization, especially if you're like let's say you've got, I know this kind of a hotter term is that digital twin, right? Simulation, right? It's just
Right.
having one of those help you learn about what could happen. And again, tech helps learn, right? So tech, again, setting expectations, tech helps give you a better ability to reach out, communicate with people. So I think that's another area. So I'm just kind of going through my model here. So tech can help you see from anywhere how processes are performing, so you can assess how things are happening, right, in your world. Um, Tech can help track your development and how people are developing, and it can actually help people develop down a path. I think about like Duolingo and stuff like that. Some really cool tech inside Duolingo that
Mhm.
says this is where you personally are at. This is
Right.
your next thing to go learn, right? So I think tech can do some great things with that. You can embed stuff and automate stuff with tech, right there in the process. And then lastly, it's just kind of you know so raising the bar. I guess tech can help you highlight where you need to raise the bar as a leader, um,
Mhm.
and kind of maybe even help you right size what that challenge is that you're offering people. So tech is wonderful. I love tech, but
Yeah.
I think tech. I think tech has downsides too. And one of the things, I'll just give you an example. One of the things DTE leaders are struggling with, and they've been struggling with it since COVID, really, when everyone went home. So DTE used to have like 1,000 huddles all across the company, like walls filled with metrics and process maps and everything like that. COVID hit and everybody went home. And so what happened to all those process maps? What happened to all that information that was just readily available as you're walking around the halls and talking? It all went into the computer screens. And so now you've got these leaders that are trying to manage their business through these daily huddles, weekly huddles, but all this information is digital. And so the downside of that tech, which is great, because now you can get people from all over to join this huddle and things like that, but the data is no longer up in front of you. Like, I don't see it on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just walk by as a leader and go, oh, I accidentally noticed this and now I'm going to follow up with you on it. It changes the way you lead, because you got to be really intentional about it. I have to go into this thing, I have to pull up this screen, I have to click these 3 buttons, and then I can get the information I want. A lot of times they weren't even looking for it. It just kind of popped up in front of them.
Yeah.
And that was a beauty of having things, on the walls and kind of in paper, and not, we'll call it like everything's tech, but like we'll call it like old tech, paper and pen, right? That's the some of the downsides, I guess, of tech, is you got to be a little bit more savvy. You got to be a little more intentional. So
Yeah, I agree. I mean, until we can get, get those recommender systems just so highly developed for people,
yeah,
could present the tech on the screen that you need, as opposed
yeah,
to, a walk by. But yeah, you're right. There has to be some better, I think, visualization, and basically standard work instruction stuff around, for people to be able to see and be a part of, just, oh yeah, that's good to see that, and you might not even say it out loud. It just happens sort of subliminally.
right.
So that's interesting. Well, good. So, you've talked about in play, there's a lot of bandwidth, a lot of capability there that can happen. So, when you think about that, what are some of the hopes and goals and vision that you have, for your employees, the teams that you work with there, even your organization, DTE? What is possible? What do you see there? What kind of a vision do you hold for that?
Yeah, you talking about for tech or just
Oh,
general
just general, yeah, and I
vision?
mean,
Okay,
it could include tech, but, or tech could help propel and support that.
right, right. So, my personal kind of vision, hope, um, it's always evolving, by the way, too. So this is kind of a more, I won't say it's a super recent involvement, but I used to think a lot about, you know, uh, you know, the company embarks on this lean journey and sticks with it, and we kind of get all this kind of critical mass of thinking, right? I've evolved a little bit since then, and I think long term, my hope right now is that every individual embarks on their own kind of improvement journey and sticks with it.
Mm-hmm.
That My hope is that the leaders of organizations, and I've been doing a lot of studying and research around capitalism and around bureaucracies and things like that, just kind of the systems that we all are kind of living in. Um, this stuff starts from the top. It does start with leadership,
Mm-hmm.
and if we can have strong leaders that want to give the power to the people to play with their work. Again, this has been around for ages. So you empower your people, empower your people. It's hard to do when you're living quarter to quarter, and you're beholden to your shareholders. And capitalism still is, that is still the prime directive. As much as we say that it's not, and it's about community, and we have all these different stakeholders, it's fine. At the end of the day, it still is
Sure.
shareholders that are driving this, right? And so having leaders that can take that and say, you know what, I still can empower my people through that. And
Sure.
in fact, when I do that, it's actually even better for me and my company and the communities and everybody else. That's where my hope and vision is.
Mm-hmm.
Not easy. I don't think it's going to be easy to get there. But if that could happen, I think there's the possibilities are just like are
Mm-hmm.
tremendous. They're tremendous for not just the company, but for people's lives, for our kind of just our world in general, right? So, yeah, so kind of evolving from this, being the best operated energy company, best in the world, best for the world, to, you know, we're just we're better humankind. I guess that's kind of
Yeah.
where I'm at with
Yeah.
this. So,
There's a bigger picture there. And I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of interesting because if you look at the basic lean model, that purports that 20% of everything that we do is value added and 80% is waste. And, you know, that's just because we have all of this underutilized bandwidth and capacity as individuals,
Yeah,
and then that translates into teams and organizations and into
yeah,
society. And so the possibilities are truly tremendous if we can begin to figure out how to unleash some of that potential. I mean, even if you moved to a 70-30
yeah,
ratio,
right,
you know, a 10% more, that's huge, you know.
yeah.
Or I mean, it's really would be 30% more if it's 20% value. So yeah, that's really interesting. So what would you say are your strengths as a lean leader? How would you describe yourself in terms of your strengths?
This feels like an interview.
I know it's like this. Actually, this is an interview.
So yeah, no.
The problem, you're already hired though, so don't worry about it.
So one of my strengths that I've been told by others is that I've got an ability to take something that's very complex and break it down, expose all the little elements that have the value in it, and kind of I'll just say, do my industrial engineer slash entrepreneur playing with it thing to create a very, we'll just call it an elegant vision for what's possible, something that doesn't take a lot to explain it. So you get something complex and make it easy and inspirational almost. You create this vision for what's possible that people want to go with, right? So again, I guess another example here is this whole leak. I talked about leak repairs, right? So we have our gas main repair crews. We're trying to help them find ways to get more productive, right? And so they've got this very complex mix of work conditions. There's, as they're, because again, you got to dig under the ground to get to that. So you've got different soil types. You got different. Are you going through sod? Are you going through asphalt? Is this a leak at the valve? Is this a leak? Where is this leak at? There's all sorts of factors that are going into this, right? And it's hard to expect from job to job what those conditions are going to be. So I'm working to help them notice, back to C1, right? Notice what's unusual in your work by getting into that really complex data set that they have, because they're collecting all kinds of data, but they only use like of the, let's call it the 30 factors of data that they have, they're only using 2 factors to understand their work. So okay, we got this information. How do we start to make sense of this and give people more clarity on what's normal and what's not, and what they could do differently, what they should expect if they're doing a full clamp repair versus doing something else. They could have different time frames for it. So again, it's the ability to say, here's this complex world you've been living in for literally, you've been collecting this data for 20 years and you still don't know what to do with it. How can we help you understand what to do with it and how to make even just something as simple as how do you schedule jobs for your crew? How do we make that much better and so that you can get more, get more for your money, as it goes. And again, back to the money, right? So
No, I
yeah,
think that's interesting. So, you're describing someone, yourself, who you do have this incredible technical background, and but you don't lead with that. That is in the background helping you. And what you're trying to do is, as you say, put your elegant vision. And really, I think what you've described to me is how do you translate that into a tactic that, this is how you do it. And I think that is extremely useful because it takes you beyond just being, what's known as an aspirational or an inspirational leader. And you become someone who can actually help people to operationalize what the expectations are.
yeah,
And that's very difficult to do. I mean, a lot of leaders might see themselves in more of a bubble, and that's not their job. But it really is. It's the coaching of the team and making sure the team is playing and all those kinds of things you've talked about.
right, right. And I think it's different too from um, there's a lot of great tacticians that I know that
Hmm.
don't play with the strategy first. They don't think
Right,
about the bigger picture first.
right.
They
They're
just
not
start
coming.
running down the path of, well, this is how you do this.
Right.
But that I think that's the other piece of this is the ability to take that thing that's complex and not just run a play. It's to
Right.
run the right play, right? And
Yeah.
so So yeah, but it's interesting. You also mentioned about tactics. I think it's really important. I just read a quote. Um, I can't remember where I read this quote, but it was a World War II general, something a very short quote saying something like, I know I'm gonna botch this up, but
Just
uh,
paraphrase. We were going to
yeah,
paraphrase.
paraphrase it. Amateurs talk about strategy, professionals talk about tactics, something along those lines. Like essentially saying the how matters. The
Yeah,
how matters.
yeah,
Um, so I thought that was an interesting quote. And
yeah.
when you
That
brought that up, I was like, oh, I guess yeah, okay.
yeah. It
Now I don't
definitely.
feel so bad being in a strategy group.
No, it's all good. I think it captures it really well. And yeah, all of those things I think are important. So when you think about that, can you tell us one or two things that you're most proud of as a lean leader?
Yeah, I think that there's one that sticks out for me and talks just about what we talked about, my hope and my vision for things, right? I think I'm most proud, not necessarily something that I did, and I'm going to call her out actually on this, and just in the event she ever watches this, I'm most proud of what Shannon Spenceley did. So, so Shannon is a great story. So let me give you some context here. So I was working at Bosco's Pizza, and you might know Bosco's from
Yes.
they're huge in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Number one food item in the schools, the Bosco sticks, right? All the kids love the Bosco sticks. And so working for Bosco's, when I first started working there, because I only worked there for a couple of years, right? Came right from Tyson as an industrial engineer, was asked to come run the plant. So I was, assistant plant manager at the plant. Ton of scrap, ton of scrap. And we're throwing dough away, throwing fully cooked breadsticks away, just tons of scrap. And so I did some analysis, right? And I talked to the owner, Mark. I said, we should really create like a QA department here. And started to run down, why. And so I said, with this department, you could save probably, if we can get X%, we could save like $1 million a year. He's like, oh God, that sounds great. So he let me do it, and so I said, okay, we got to get some people to do this. And so um, we hired right off the production floor. So I asked, who are the people that know the product the best? And Shannon was our night shift person that they said, oh, Shannon knows the product the best. All right. So we brought in Shannon along with a couple other people from each of the shifts. We ran 3 shifts. And Shannon started working at Bosco's years prior to that, I think 5, 6 years prior to that, as an hourly sanitation worker. So she was sweeping the floors, literally sweeping the floors. She eventually got herself into production, which is where I found her in this. And so we brought in Shannon, brought in these other new inspectors who had zero QA experience before. And they'd meet with me, and I had a QA manager that I had working for me as well at the time. And I'd always talk to them about that, like, oh my gosh, this is so great that we're doing this. This could be such a great career for you all. And so I remember Tammy and Shannon, I was like, this could be great. And they were always like, this sounds good, but I don't really know what this is yet. It sounds like we're just kind of doing checklists. I said, no, this is this huge potential opportunity for you. Go take classes on quality. I'm trying to like get them to go learn more, right? I said, go look for opportunities outside of Bosco's even to get experience in this world, because we're just starting this out. Like there's so much to learn. You can learn, then come back even. I remember Shannon was like shocked when she first heard me say that. She's like, wait, you want us to leave Bosco's? Like, what are you thinking? Like, what are you talking about? But in my mind, like I had this vision for them, like as people, right? So I was trying to give them this pathway and try to help them work to understand there's a value to this role that you don't see yet. And that was my part in it, was just kind of share the value in it. But then Shannon was the one who took it and ran with it. So she got familiarized with all the FDA rules, USDA standards. She became the lead for auditing and food safety at Bosco's. And then she left Bosco's and really took off. And so I caught up with her maybe a year or so ago. She got a job at Kowalski, and you might know Kowalski
Sure.
company. She
Yeah.
became their quality manager, and now
Oh,
she's over at McClure's Pickles, and she's doing great things over there as well. So just so impressed with her journey. And I see
great.
her on LinkedIn, and she's posting stuff about quality, and it's just like she really took that role and just ran with it for her life. And it just makes me proud that I was able to support in just that little tiny way, that little change in her life, and support that success. I just feel so good about that. Not so much lean. I know this is not necessarily lean stuff, but
No.
it's something I'm definitely proud of. I mean, she did awesome. So
That's great.
Yeah,
Well, that's good. I mean, it really speaks to your focus on people and respect
yeah,
for people. And really, truly, I think when leaders do that and they're not just thinking about people in the context of the job and that relationship, but who are they? Who could they be? What does their career and their growth pathway look like? That's a
yeah.
totally different view on how to lead people. So I really appreciate that example. So let's flip the script then. What are you most concerned about as a lean leader? What kinds of things worry you the most? Some of the points of pain, as we often talk about in lean, that really bother you a lot, that you think we need to tend to. Or what does that look like for you?
Yeah. Along similar lines, I'll say what concerns me as a lean leader versus just being a leader, because again, those two are the same to me. The
Yeah.
chief concern I've got is how are my people feeling?
Yeah,
What's going on in their worlds? What's going on in their heads? I'm always trying to peer inside people's lives. What motivates you? What's kind of demotivating right now for you? Um, and uh, again, because how you experience your day is going to how you experience your work, how you experience your whole, it's just going to drive it. Your feelings, your attitudes, your beliefs, they're going to come out, right? And so that's my chief concern. That's my chief concern. And I think the big challenge there then is how do we promote the the right people with the right mindset? So I want, again, my vision for this is everybody gets to experience um, this empowerment, right? This
mhm,
empowerment, this ability to play with their work. I keep coming back to that. I want you to play with your work because that's that drives so many good things. You have choice, you have autonomy. You're doing the things for yourself. You're making an impact. If you're making things better, those are all great things. I want people to have that. If we don't have other leaders in the company that understand that and want to give people that empowerment, and we keep pulling up people that maybe are I'm about hitting the numbers and driving people, and
yeah,
it's
mhm,
you execute. Your job is not to think, you just execute, which we have a lot of that.
sure.
Every time you pull one of those leaders up, you break it. You break the whole chain. And that's the problem that I have is I tend to see a lot of leaders get promoted because they execute really, really well, but a lot of times they're not strategic about it, and
Mm.
they don't really have the ability to create that vision and create challenges for people to do it themselves and empowering their people to do it. And so it's really hard to see people that have all these skills, they get passed over because they're in roles as doers, or they can't show off their stuff, or they sit and they struggle in this role where they're being told to execute. And I got to be honest with you, I'm guilty of doing that too. There's one person in my mind. It's one of the people it's one of my big I wish I could have made it different people.
Mhm.
Um, but that's something I do think about a lot is how are people feeling? Do they feel empowered? Do they feel like they can and they
Mm.
have the skills to and the desire to just again play with their work and just really try to live their life and put themselves in their again bring their creative spirit to the work. That's what I want to see for people.
No, I think that's great, and certainly the promotion pathway, does signal what the company really does value.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so, oftentimes we don't understand that. So you say somebody maybe is executing, getting to the bottom line, but there's the bigger question, at what cost? And so are
yeah,
the leaders stepping back and looking at this systemic view of what does this mean and where does this really get us? And what does it signal?
right,
What's the communication, the tacit
right.
communication message here that we're
It's
sending
one
out.
of those it's one of those five frequencies I talk about. What do you reward
Yeah,
and recognize, right? If
that's right.
you're rewarding and recognizing people for being an executor, that sends a very clear signal that all we want you just to execute, and then you'll get some promotion from us.
Yeah,
Don't worry about messing with things and playing with, just do that job. It's like,
yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah,
No, definitely. I would say maybe the unscarf model, right?
yeah, right.
That you mentioned earlier. So,
Go for
uh,
the fear side, right?
and there you go. There you go. So if there's something you could improve about your leadership practice, what would that be? What does that look like? What are you thinking about in terms of, yourself as a lean leader, your presence in the company and working with the people that you obviously love and care about?
I think the one, because again, just like we were talking about, this view that I have isn't shared with everybody. Not
Yeah.
all leaders think this way. Not my leaders don't necessarily think this way. And so I think that's an easy kind of question for me to answer because it's what I want to work on is more clearly stating that case and
Hmm.
clearly stating my views on people and why I want to organize things the way I do, promote and develop people the way I do. Um, I have a really easy time helping these same leaders understand process and data and systems um, and I get them to clearly see benefits from a financial standpoint or from a satisfaction standpoint, customer satisfaction, things like that. Not so easy with the views on people, and I still haven't figured that out exactly. I know they want, it's kind of that bias thinking. They want to hear the good things about the money and the process and things like that. Do they necessarily want to think about it in terms of the people that way? I don't know. So I haven't really thought that deeply on this, I guess, until now, to even consider how I improve what I'm trying to do here. But to improve it, I'd say that I guess I don't have a standard right now. So I kind of go through my problem. I have a problem. I'm going to solve my problem in a very scientific way. I got to experiment my way through this, right? So my expected outcome, though, would be that some pass fail of leaders will agree with my methodology and still let me do my thing. Even if they don't agree with my choices, they'll still let me do my thing. That's that's what I want to happen. Up, you're frozen up on me here. Oh no. Uh-oh. Yeah, I can't hear you, Shannon. I wonder if I need to leave and then come back because it is totally frozen. All right, I'm going to leave and then come back. We'll see what happens.